As you noticed by the thumbnail, Billy Batson is today's project. Starting with a best action figure, well actually two of them because you need two to swap parts and make the figure that you see here. And of course we'll be getting into using the epoxy to change out or mold some of the pieces and using some Mcfarlane hair pieces, the hair sculpts, to make these different head swaps. The nice thing about this action figure is that it comes with interchangeable heads, so you don't have to really do anything more difficult but to disassemble it and paint it, and we'll get into that. Well, the easiest part is to remove that paint off of those heads using some acetone and a cotton swab, and that's pretty much it there, except now we have to outfit these heads with some different hair pieces, and that's why we're going to use some of these hair sculpts from the Mcfarlane head sculpts that I ripped off some of those heads and decided to use these. And yeah, I was going to sell those heads as extra fodder pieces, but when I saw what I could do with these hair swaps or these toupees, well, these turned out really well. But let's get into disassembling the figure for you to understand what I'm talking about. You're going to need these two action figures from Best Action, and I'll leave the logo in the board there so you can see it in case you forget what the company is. But you need these two, and you're going to swap the legs from one to the other, and you're going to use the head sculpt. Now, both of the kits come with 3 different heads. I've already used the other 3 for something else. But if you want to use all 6, then you've got an incredible array of expressions. And of course, if you get a lot of these other head sculpts that you can remove the hair pieces from, and you'll end up with a lot of different looks. But let me show you how I did that. And of course, you'll have to start with a Superman Dark Knight Returns head sculpt, remove the hair, and carve out the key that holds that hair sculpt into the actual head. Let's take a look at the video. Now this is not an exact science, so you'll have to stop periodically and test fit the head and the hair sculpt. Make sure that it sits as far down as it can so that it matches up with the ears. And of course, if it does not, then the head sculpt is much too large, such as this one. Big muffin head like this is going to have to be carved down so that that head sculpt or the hair sculpt can fit onto this head. So you have to mark it out with a pen. You can do it with a pencil if you want. And the only thing you need this line for is so that you don't go over the area that does not need to be carved out. Now each head sculpt and hair piece is going to be totally different, so you'll have to test fit each individual piece so that you can fit it correctly. So don't swap head pieces onto a different head or onto the same head thinking it's going to be the same carving. You're gonna have to tailor each head individually. Now take a close look at these two bodies. It's the same company, the same figure or character. However, the construction is different. Larger peg on the left, smaller peg on the right. We want the one in the yellow on the right with a smaller peg because it has better articulation at the shoulders. Now, those heads at the top had to be retrofitted to fit that particular ball peg. Well, at least one of them did. The other three came with it. Now, the epoxy sculpt that I'm using here is what I used to sculpt the tennis shoes and of course the bottom of the pants. And I added some texture to the bottom of the tennis shoes by using one of the capes that I removed from another figure. This is a Mcfarlane figure cape, and just by pressing the epoxy sculpt while it's still moist, it can give you a texture that you need for the bottom of those shoes. Pretty simple stuff. Once your epoxy sculpt is dry, your figure will look like this. And yes, you can add the belt loops if you want and the collar as well. Now, you're gonna have to retrofit some of these heads, even though they come with the figure, because they fit really tight. You're gonna have to carve out that center of that fitting. Very minimal. You don't want to go too far because then they will be loose, so that they snap on quickly and easily. They require a lot of force without that. Now, once your figure is painted, it should look like this. Blue pants, red shirt, and the head pieces should be dry on the sculpt. It's going to be easy to pop these in and out. Now, these figures come with an array of hands, and if you bought both figures, then you've got a lot of little hands to choose from. However, there's a problem. Be advised that this figure, as small as it is, has a lot of paint rub issues, especially at the hips where the legs peg into that ball socket, and you can tell from the video that I've already done that ahead of time. Now, those knees also have some problems. You cannot take out the peg or the connection there because it's a pinless joint, just like Hasbro figures are. Now, take a look at the arms. The arms themselves also have problems, not only at the elbows, but this ball socket for the shoulder also paint rubs or rubs into the area at the side. I've already sanded down the main areas. However, this was not enough. This was my first of 3 attempts to get rid of this paint rub, and so it took me a long time to do so. There is a way to do it easier, and one of those ways is to open up that torso and release those shoulder ball sockets to make it easier to sand them down. Let me show you how to open it up so you can release those shoulders from that socket. You're gonna have to use a flat screwdriver. Oh, keep in mind that you don't want to sand those sockets that hold in those pegs. If you sand down those sockets that hold in those pegs, then you're done for it. Not only will it be loose, but they will fall out, and you'll have to modify it for them to stay in. Now take a look at the socket here in this shoulder ball. It is really, really tight to move it as it is, which means you are going to have paint rub. All you can do is grind away where the two surfaces touch. You can't take it apart because for some reason the way they constructed it is incredibly tight and will actually break the peg. You can use a grinder to grind inside the actual shoulder socket and it will alleviate some of that problem. Again, this was one of my 3 attempts at doing this. Now if you twist the torso on the bottom or the abs on the torso, it'll crack it open at the seams on the left and right side. You will still need a screwdriver to wedge it open a little bit wider to release that ball joint and remove the arms. Now, keep in mind that you don't want to sand the areas where those 2 pegs sit into, otherwise it's going to be loose. Make sure that you carve out only the areas where the surfaces touch, and because it is so small, it's going to be tedious and it's going to be difficult, but it can be done. Again, because it is so small, you're not going to be able to get rid of 100% of the paint rub. You will still have some visible in the extremities of those joints. However, for the most part, it's going to look really, really good. And it turns out to be a really nice figure once it's completed. Once you clear out all of those paint rub issues, this is what your figure is going to look like. It's going to look clean and polished as best it can for a tiny little figure. It's only about 5 inches. But this animated look on the faces looks really, really good. And he's actually the correct size for that Shazam figure that I finished earlier. So it turned out really, really well. Now this small action figure has a lot of other uses for other characters. I could only pick one and I picked Billy Batson, but you could use it for a young Jonathan Kent, just like the cartoon that was just released. However, this concludes our video, and I'm going to leave you with a few different looks of those different faces for this character. I hope that you liked this short video. I hope that you learned something. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, leave those in the comments bar below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of this clip, and stay tuned toward the end.
you